Hey guys, as I'm sure you can tell by the title, this is going to be a Q&A type video, and I'm not going to do too many of these, but I definitely wanted to do one for my first 1,000 subscribers because it does really mean a whole lot that 1,000 people have subscribed to a channel that's mostly about classical guitar. And I say that because I always thought classical guitar was not that cool of a thing. Anyway, if you're a current subscriber, like I said, thank you so much, and if you're not and you want to subscribe, then thank you to you as well. I do have a few announcements that I want to make about the future of my channel, but I'm going to put that towards the end because I do want to get to your guys' questions first. So as always, yeah, let's get started. RNT asks, how are you? You know, I'm doing great. I apologize because I probably said your name wrong, but I hope that you're doing well as well. MattJP_03 asks, why is there no instrument better than classical guitar? Now, I want to answer this kind of jokingly and just say because it's classical guitar, but I do have a personal opinion on why I think classical guitar is one of the better instruments. And my reason why is because it's kind of right in the middle between that mainstream pop instrument and also in the classical music world, because most classical guitarists, not all, but a lot of them have a strong background in pop music, so a lot of us got started that way. And people that play that can connect to classical guitar because they recognize the guitar part in there. And people who like classical music can relate to classical guitar because they recognize the classical part in there. So we can kind of appeal to both audiences, which is kind of cool, which to me I think makes classical guitar definitely one step up above some other instruments, at least when it comes to the general relatability. The only one that I think maybe beats it out, in my opinion, would be the piano, because it does the same thing, but people seem to like and know the piano even more. Daniel T. Monahan asks, what's one thing that you don't see changing in the guitar in the future for good or for bad? So there's a lot of things I don't see changing, but I want to start with something that I think is kind of good and bad, and that's just going to be what we see as the core repertoire. Now, when I'm talking about the core repertoire, I'm talking about music such as Sword, Giuliani, Carcassi, Leo Brouwer, and people like that. All that music is great music, and yes, you could say it's overplayed, but I want to say it's overplayed because it's great music for students as well as professionals, and people just seem to like it. And what I think is great about that is you can see that either as a good thing or as a bad thing. You know, it could go either way, depending on how you look at it. The Laurentanian guitarist asks, where do you see the classical guitar community/industry going in 20 years? I think the key word here is community, because the classical guitar community, even if the core repertoire and all the things that we do are going to stay pretty the same, I think the community itself is really starting to bring the guitar into a more modern approach, I guess. One of the biggest things that comes to mind is some Facebook groups that aren't focused on playing so much, they're just focused on the human behind the classical guitar, getting to know the guitar and getting to understand it in a way that we can all be in on the joke together. I think there's tons of other creators out there that are doing great things with the guitar. Two ones that come to mind on YouTube are Brandon Acker and Lucas Brar, who are making videos that are not only informative, but are actually pretty interesting to watch. I think people using the classical guitar to play their own movie arrangements and video game arrangements is also doing a whole lot for the classical guitar community. People such as, of course, Beyond the Guitar and Sam Griffin are the number ones that come to mind for that. And of course, if you watch their following, they're really making their own community and getting a lot of people who maybe might not be interested in classical guitar, interested in classical guitar. Andrew Smaz asks, why do I think flamenco guitar isn't more commonly taught, and my takes of style being taught in classical programs? So what I want to say about flamenco, because this is what I heard from a flamenco guitarist that I know, is that most flamenco guitar players know how to play classical guitar pretty well. Do they play it with the same tone and maybe the understanding of the music as a classical guitarist might? No, but we definitely wouldn't really do that about flamenco music either. But what's interesting is most of them know how to play it at least a little bit. They understand it. And most classical guitarists, with the exception of a few, really don't know anything about playing flamenco music. And the other reason why is because from what I hear, flamenco music isn't really taught in the same way as classical guitar. And what I mean by that is when you learn flamenco guitar, you don't go ahead and get a book with pieces and studies, you just learn it the same way electric guitar players maybe learn how to play rock and blues, by listening and then just playing it over and over and playing with other people. At least that's what I hear from flamenco guitarists. Now, when it comes to style being taught in university programs, I guess my thoughts would just be that some colleges are actually trying to incorporate other styles of music as well, which I think is great. I think classical guitarists oftentimes limit themselves to just classical guitar. And yes, many of us have a background in rock, in folk, and blues guitar possibly, but we never really formally taught that. At least most of us learn how to play that just on our own when we're first starting, before we go over and convert over to classical. And I think that one thing that classical guitarists really could benefit from would be learning how to play other styles of music like you're saying. So yeah, I think that we should do it, and it's a shame that we don't. Andrew also adds, you are a really cool person, by the way. Thank you, Andrew, and I hope that we get to meet one day, because I'm sure you're a pretty cool person as well. Jordan Angulo Guitar asks, what was your practice routine like when you were in music school versus to how it is now? You know, I've only been at music school for a few years, and one thing I'd say is enjoy it while you're there, definitely. If you're currently a student and you're able to practice 4 to 5 hours a day, enjoy that. When I was in school, my practice routine consisted of scales, arpeggios, studies, working on old pieces, working on new pieces, and also working on chamber music. When you're out of school, it becomes pretty easy to get kind of not as motivated because most of the time you're not doing chamber music, and most of the time you don't have little small performances coming up. And when you're out of school, you have to find and make those opportunities for yourself. So not only do you have to work for something that doesn't exist, but if you want it to exist, you have to work for that as well. So it can tie into your practice a little bit and make it maybe a little more unmotivating. Based M. Brown asks, who would win in a game of Super Smash Bros? Scott Tennant or Andrew York? So this is a great question because as you guys might know, if you watched one of my first videos I ever did, an interview with Scott Tennant, we learned that Scott Tennant would main Mario. But the question still remains, who would Andrew York main? Now, Andrew York, if you're watching this, let me know in the comments who you would main because it would make our jobs a whole lot easier. But if he doesn't answer, guys, leave your guesses below and hopefully Andrew York will see this and he can tell us if we're right or wrong. Ben Diamond Guitarist asks, what was the most fun video to make? And when I saw this question, I really thought about it for a while because honestly, I don't think I know. There are so many videos that I had a great time making in terms of the filming or the editing, but I think the ones that were the most fun to make were the ones that when I was researching what I needed to know for the video, I ended up actually learning a lot more than I planned to. When I was doing a video about Roland Dions, there was tons of stuff I didn't know. I actually read through 2 different doctoral dissertations, and I learned so much about Dions. So much stuff I couldn't even put in the videos, but it was just so interesting to find those. And even though I didn't put them in there, they were still part of the process. So right now, those are the videos that I think were the most fun to make. Marlon Calic asks, what string tensions do I use and what are the differences? So first of all, the strings I use are these ones. These are Augustine, Imperial, Blues. So what the Imperial means is Imperial means they're hard tension and the Blues means hard tension basses. Now one thing I like about Augustines a lot is that you can really mix and match the tensions pretty easily, unlike other sets that you might find from other companies. And I think the differences have to do really with what guitar you're using and also how you want to sound as a player. I used to love using the Augustine Regals because they just felt so loud and tight and full. But when I got the guitar that I play on now, that loud, tight, and full sound ended up sounding tinny and muffled and not really the great sound. So I switched over to the Imperials, which got me the same sound as I got with the Regals, but on this guitar. Now when it comes to bass strings, I do like to have a bit more tension in there because I think the basses, for me, I kill them instantly. They're dead after like 2 or 3 days of playing. But if I use the lighter tensions, I think they do feel a bit better in my fingers, but when they die, it just sounds like a rubber band pretty much on the guitar. I think if you're not sure though, a great place to start would be just using plain old normal tension. And that way if you can see if you think they're too hard, if you think they're too light, and figure out where to go from there. When you use normal tension, it's going to be pretty normal, as I'm sure you can guess, but maybe you want to have a bit tighter sound. Maybe your fingers are just a bit stronger. They need a bit more resistance on the strings. Or maybe you don't have as hard of a touch, and if you play too hard and hard tension, it feels like you're overworking yourself. And you might want to use a lighter tension string so that way you can get the sound that you want without having to work as hard. Benjamin Tin asks, who or what are your greatest inspirations? And this is an interesting question because I could very well just answer it as a guitarist and say, yeah, of course, I'm so inspired by Manuel Barrueco or David Russell. But I'm going to go ahead and skip that because even though this video is about classical guitar, I want to talk about things that have actually inspired me with the channel. So one of my inspirations for making the channel was just seeing how big and how cool the electric guitar community was, and I guess even other styles of music as well. People like Adam Neely, Rick Beato, Music Is Win, Paul Davis, and all those guys. Are they making videos to impress the best guitarists or musicians on the internet? No, probably not. I think their goal is to make music just kind of similar to mine, just more accessible. Now, outside of music YouTubers, I really do have a big admiration for people like Mr. Beast and Mark Rober, just because they can take a concept and make it so accessible, mostly through their personalities and also how they do their videos. There's so many things I've learned from watching Mr. Beast videos or watching interviews with him, talking about how YouTube works, talking about his video editing style and all that stuff. If you guys don't check that stuff out and you're into content creation, I would highly recommend to look that stuff up. You're going to learn so much. WW asks, do you have tips on playing in a consistent manner when trying different guitars? So for this, one experience that comes to mind is when I went over to GSI to do a few videos for them. When I got there, I only had a few minutes to try out each guitar, maybe about 10 minutes or so, not only to get to know the guitar, but also to figure out which pieces I was going to play would sound best on each guitar. And that was pretty challenging. I was going back and forth playing every single piece on every guitar. Now let's say that you're in a situation where you do want to play pretty consistently the same way. Best thing I would say to do is blindfold yourself. Don't worry about what the guitar is. Don't worry about the wood. Don't worry about the maker. Don't worry about the price. Just play the guitar and play it as you would normally and see what comes out. I'm not saying that you should change what you're doing based on the guitar you're playing, but I'm also saying that you shouldn't not change what you're doing if the guitar makes you want to do something different. And final question from Brian L. Robert, who I have to say has a YouTube channel pretty similar to mine, so if you like my stuff, maybe you'll like his stuff as well. Anyway, he asks, what are my long-term plans for the channel, and do I want YouTube to be a career, or is this kind of just a hobby for now? So this is a nice segue to that final part of the video that I was talking about, because yes, I do have some plans for the channel as well. And I guess to answer the second part of your question, right now it's kind of just a hobby, something I'm doing for fun. I'm doing things that I wish existed when I was first starting classical guitar, and when I was in school for classical guitar even. In terms of it being a career, maybe one day if I get enough support through you guys and through other sources as well. Now in terms of plans for the channel, let's go ahead and talk about that as well, because I do have a few plans that I want to do. So I'm definitely going to continue my A Little Bit About series. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for more of those. If you guys have pieces they want me to check out, of course, leave them in the comments below on either those videos or on this video, because I would love to do videos that you guys have recommendations on. Now, the other video series that I'm planning to start pretty soon is going to be a series called Get to Know, and it's going to be about the backstory behind our favorite players and maybe even composers as well. It's going to be very similar to the A Little Bit About series, so be on the lookout for that if that interests you, because I'm really looking forward to looking into some of these favorite players, and maybe I can even get some quotes from them as well. And the last content idea that I'm going to share for now is I do want to start making this channel more community-based. As you guys might have saw in previous videos, I love including videos of other people playing. And there's going to be another thing pretty soon that's even more like that, where people are going to be able to share their playing, but that one I'm going to save for maybe a later announcement. Anyway, the final plan I'm going to share is that in the near future, I do plan on opening a Patreon page, because part of this stuff, as I'm sure you can guess, takes a lot of time, and it is time I could spend teaching or practicing or doing other things. So if you guys want to support what I do, definitely be on the lookout for Patreon. Anyway, that's all for this video. It ended up being a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be, but if you're still here, thank you so much again for 1,000 subscribers, and I don't want to make this any longer than it's going to be, so I hope to see you guys in the next video, and here's to another 1,000.